All right, guys, I thought I'd put together this video really quick just so we can talk about our next assignment that we're going to be doing, which is an old decrepit house. Okay, it's nice to have some more environments in your portfolio. That's why I picked this assignment. Just to go over some basics, design and model an old decrepit house that is alone or abandoned. The silhouette design of the house is extremely important and should read with multiple roof structures elevating above one primary roof. The use of dormers, multiple leveled roofs. So what does that mean? That means roofs at different levels. Okay. Cross-angled roof lines, which means if you have a roof that's going horizontal, perhaps you put in a cross angle where there's another roof line that meets each other in the shape of what we call like a perpendicular angle or a T. Okay. And steeples as well to help define an interesting silhouette shape. A historical design influence of old, decrepit, haunted houses can be examined by researching Victorian house structures. A lot of Victorian houses tend to be the perfect background in detail for haunted, decrepit houses. And a lot of it's because of the character that goes in there. There's an old-fashioned, really authentic style with Victorian design that gets people to sort of, make a commonality or thread to. If you think of the old house from Psycho, that was a Victorian themed house. When you think of other movies like Hotel T, which, that's more Transylvania based houses, but when we go in and we take a look at Monster House, you start looking at houses that are very old, decrepit, made out of wood. They have porches. That's something I didn't put on there. I should have put in the next little section. Entryways, walkways, different shaped windows, and so on to really add to the overall feel. Now I put some design elements here to consider. I'll add windows on here in just a second, but old chimneys, old bare trees, exhaust pipes coming out from the roof line. Okay, so what would exhaust pipes, some of you don't realize, even your house today, there's pipes that come out that allow, like when you take a shower, you have a valve or a fan that goes on that pulls out the water. That comes out of a little pipe up above. Some of the older houses have some various pipes that come out of the top of the ceiling roof line. Okay, brick walls, graveyards, houses on hills, stacked stone with lights on them known as columns. Okay, old wooden steps, old Victorian lights, parts of the house tilting or falling apart. I put this word here, contrapposta. Okay, that is known as, that's the Italian word for counter angles. Those of you that have studied figure drawing, it's an important part of designing. So when we're talking about counter angles, let me show you a model that I did here a couple of years back. Look at how this has a tilt going this way, and then this has a tilt going the opposite way. That's what contrapposta is. So when you get into figure drawing and you learn how to draw the figure correctly, you have houses tilted at different angles. Okay, parts of that of the figure drawing, and so we want to incorporate that into part of our house. We don't want to have everything tilted all the same angle to one side. You have to have counter angle to have interesting design sense. So if you look here at this roof line, okay, sorry about that, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back here to the beginning. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Look at this angle that's right in here, and then look at this other secondary counter that's sort of tilted the opposite way. This roof line's tilted this way, this one's tilted in this way. There's a distinct reason for that. That's part of good designing and composition that comes with practice. I learned that in draftsmanship and illustrating, and I actually learned it from figure drawing, and it adds a lot to a design element. Okay, so if we go through and look at, let me zoom back out of here, and you look at all the reference that I posted up on this for this assignment, you'll see the use of contrapposta and counter angles as a great way to add to old decrepit steps, porches, part of the roof line, support structures. Everything can have that involved into it. Okay, that's a really, really important key element. As we scroll down here, this is one of my students modeled this last semester, Michael Johnson. It's a really nice model. It's very nicely done. A couple things I never had a chance to really critique it with him. One of the things I might add on to this might be some more, if you look at some of the angles in here, there's not as much contrapposta going on. There's a lot of straight edges. And so if we found a way to tilt the roof line and have some counter angles there, that would add a little bit more to it. The other thing too that I might add in terms of composition, I might grab that fountain and move it over here more, somewhere in the middle, and I would add more of a, I would pop out the front entrance door, because when you look at this, your eye sort of goes all over and it doesn't know exactly where to land for the front entrance. When we look at Victorian historical elements, the front entrance is always marked very clearly. Okay, it's always a little bit different. So we talked about having different types of cornices, having dormers. A dormer is a structure like this that sticks out above the roof line with a window on it. Look at this entryway right here, and it has a separate element that's right above it. Okay, if I go along and take a look at some other reference, again, look at, here's the front. There's a porch that brings me and elevates me up. So going over the key elements, right? A porch is really, really important. Also gives you a chance to introduce counter angle on the design of the steps. You could come in here and have some stone columns there with some really old-fashioned Victorian lights on there, okay? There are always porches and overhangs with Victorian houses. And then a lot of times they have these little like crown molding details. Look at just this little triangle right here, just sort of sitting there. And then you see that repeated up here again. I don't even know, that's just a decorative element that's there. You have crown molding baseboards and edge detail that are up or around the top here. All you have to do is make one cool looking column, okay? You can do that using NURBS, or you can do that using polys. Make one cool column, then you can duplicate that and use it over. It's the same thing if you look at some of the railing that goes around a property. It has really cool edging and detail to it as well. Okay, look at this upper steeple right here. We talked about a little bit earlier steeples that exaggerate part of the silhouette shape of your design sensibilities. So steeples can be, this is a square sort of steeple that elevates out. Okay, perhaps you have a round steeple. That's totally fine. Look at that chimney. Look at how different that chimney is. Everything is left for design with Victorian houses in historical architecture. You're not going to see tons of right angles. The only right angle you might see in here is a straight line that recedes downward for a particular edge. Outside of that, this is rounded. This has detail. There's detail here. There are column details going along here. There are stair details. The chimney is in a different level of detail with multiple angles on it. Okay, I put this example up. I found this. This is something you don't want to do. This feels sort of barren. It doesn't have too much of a Victorian feel to it. When we look at this, what are the key areas that's wrong with this? Well, the silhouette needs improvement. Okay, there can be a lot more done to the house. I really like the steeple idea with the church bell or the ringing bell in it. That's a great idea. Okay, but the house structure, it looks like if you were in here as one person, it looks like you have a room that's like 4 by 4 feet. There's barely enough room in there to walk around. It doesn't feel like a house. And in that note, having a bell up there, which is very symbolic of churches, especially Victorian built churches, okay, that doesn't feel right to me either, because they used to have a long portion there. So whoever put this together, I grabbed this from online, they should have done a little bit more reference and added a little bit more to the sensibilities of their design element here. If they would have had a porch up here, if they would have expanded the front door, if they would have looked at some samples of Victorian windows. Some Victorian windows have rounded tops to them. So what I will do in the next couple meetings to come, I'll show you how to make a nice, cool Victorian window, okay, with a nice rounded top to it. It's actually pretty easy. We'll talk about some other structures. I'll take the model that I have and we'll dissect it. We'll take a look at the roof tiles and how to put some other elements into it. Now, the only difference is the one that I did that's up here, I did this for a production, okay? So I had a script that called for an old decrepit house that had chain link fence around it, okay? If you want to do the chain link fence, you could. It eats up a lot of detail. You don't have to. You can have an old decrepit house up on a hill surrounded with an old brick wall with falling gate entrance walls, okay? So I didn't put that in part of our design element, but if you start going across, looking at some of the other reference that's here. Look at the steeples that are in here. Look at this guy blended Photoshop with some other live elements of trees in here, but look at the nice old trees. Look at the old battered fence up there with the mailbox. That's a great little touch. You can add it into something. Look at the column structure that had like those round vases, a big vase there that had maybe flowers out of it that's tilted over to the side. Okay, that's some photo touch up and reference done, but again, it's nice reference in terms of look at the steeple, look at the corner, look at the counter angle roof line here that goes perpendicular to the main roof line. Okay, look at that. Boy, you talk about a great little front element to add some simple historical reference to your environment. Look at that old fence that's sort of fallen over and tilted. It's a wrought iron fence with little sharp pointy things. No, you don't have to stick a human head on it, but point being that just an old fence like that doesn't even have to be wrought iron. It could be an old wooden fence that's decrepit and that's been falling apart. Okay, look at these old gravestones right here. If you ever want to look up some really fantastic looking gravestones, you can go do a Google search on old graveyards of the South, or you can type in Paris graveyards, and there's some really cool structures there. When I was younger, I went to go see the burial site of Jim Morrison in France, right? And it's this really cool, old, spooky-looking graveyard with really nice, historical, detailed gravestones. This is a great little piece here. Somebody put this together in Photoshop. Just look at that Victorian reference of that house. Do you see I was talking about making a connection between the Victorian reference and the haunted house feel? Does this look abandoned? Yes, it does. There's one little light on here. There's old decrepit trees in here. It's going to be hard. It's going to be easy to construct this in Photoshop. It's going to be hard to build something like this. It's going to be realistic enough and Maya to come off to the viewers being this old decrepit house, but you can if you work smart. So when we think about working smart, you don't want to have a bunch of empty shapes. You want to use some props. Look at this right here. Look at the old fence in the front. Okay. Yeah, you could model on a couple old decrepit trees, turn them into some different angles. You could have a shed that comes off the side of the house. There could be an old secondary shed that's the kind you walk up to, and then you could have basement doors that you just added in there. In fact, I'll go write those onto the design list as other little features. So we talked about oval windows, okay, or other windows with rounded tops, okay, that aren't necessarily like this right here. See how this has sort of a rounded top to it? Another great Victorian element, okay. Talked about sheds. We talked about entry doors to basements. Okay, these are all kinds of really cool elements that can be added. I mean, this one's on its way here. Somebody put this up here. Do you see how the silhouette reads? Look at the foreground elements, this old gate right here. Very nicely done. Okay, but look at the house. The house is missing the detail. We want the house to have the most amount of importance and detail and Victorian reference in it to make it pop. Okay, right now this is just a square block. Now, yeah, you could go in there and texture some of that, but when you look at Victorian reference, there's lots of detail and information that's added on to part of the house that needs to take place. Okay, what I really liked about this reference photo, the reason why I put it up here, not just it's a Victorian themed house and it's very small, but look at this, how wonderful this front shape is right here. This is the importance of gathering the right reference and pulling important facts from that reference. Look at this cool curved top here. That this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-sided bay window that pops out of here. Then all you have to do after you have the 5-sided, you model one little row of detail like this with these curved little elements on it. You model one window, and then it's just duplicating, wrapping that around. In fact, you can then take that window. That's the same window that's used up there. There's no wrong with using that, just changing some of the upper trim that goes onto it. So I will do a demo for you guys on that. Look at this house. Look at it. What is it? It's not necessarily that it feels a little tilted, but it's on a hill. Do you see that? Okay. So that when I talked about houses on a hill, in terms of design style, if your house is just on a flat ground plane, it's going to be boring and not as interesting. When we look at this hill that runs this way. It's running at an angle, and then this house is built like it's built to be flush on that, or level. That's what flush means if you didn't know that. Level on that hill, but it looks like it's also been, it's so old it's starting to tilt a little bit to the right side. There's a lot that creates character. Look at this roof line. Talk about counter angles, or what we call contrapposto. Look at this counter angle here, and then this one curving back in this way a little bit more. Look at this old beat up porch that's right there. Okay. Ice cream, man. Okay. Someone's phone's going off. All right. So there's a bunch of reference up there for you. Look at the beauty in those old stones right there. Look at that old tree with some of this old plant and moss growing on it. I did a demo in the last class about how to create like a leaf structure. In the foreground, you could build a column, and you could have a leaf structure that's wrapping around it with an old light, and that's it, something simple. Then there can be, so when you think of that, you have the entryway, an old column made out of stone with a light on it, and then after that there's like an old gate that's partially opened that's made out of steel, and then there's a pathway that goes up. Part of the path might turn into a bunch of old stones placed in the yard, and that leads you up to the front porch of the house. Okay, use these historical elements to guide you through part of your design process. Okay, the Gaelic cross that's seen right here in this graveyard, another great sample that you can use inside. So maybe when you think of old houses, maybe there's a historical element to this house where it's passed down from 5 generations of family in the United States, and they turn the front yard into a burial yard. Why not? It adds character to it. Okay, that's plain, that's empty, not enough reference placed on the house there. Okay, look at that Victorian reference, just beautiful. Okay, look at the multiple facades there. Look at this big front facade, the entrance doors here. Okay, look at this one's similar in shape but a little bit different in overall size relationships, and then this one's a lot smaller. Look at that. Here's that sort of hexagon roof steeple that's popping out of there. So you can get away with, now in Maya you have to sort of make it make sense, but you can have these angular hexagon or 5-sided or octagon shaped roof steeples, then with dormers popping out of that. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Just make it look right. I mean, that's another angle of this guy right here. Let's look at that detail and that arches up there. You don't have to go through and construct all this detail every time. Look at this arch that's right in here. If I construct that arch once, it's just now duplicating and reusing it inside your scene. Okay, model smart. If I was working on this again, I would model maybe one key window, make a second or tertiary version of that window. I'd model a couple archers. I'd model a couple different variations of corners and roof dormers. Okay, I'd model one steeple, and then I'd start arranging this. Now, one of the things you guys were supposed to do in your thumbnails is you were supposed to, I wanted you guys thinking about this, but I made a mistake. I forgot to post a reference up here on the blog, so this would help you out tremendously. Look at the variation in sizes here. Large, medium, small. Okay, look at the counter angles here. I have a roof line coming this way. I have a counter angle going this way. We talked about elevation. There's always, it looks very nice to have things on one story, is like the porch, and then everything else of the house gets elevated onto different levels above that. There's a second story, a third story, and even like a fourth story up here. That makes it visually appealing and interesting to the viewer. Okay? Look at these rounded roof windows. So what I like to do when I gather reference, look at that chimney. Take that chimney and just make it taller and add it to the side of the house here. Okay, it adds a lot of character to it. That's your goal, is to create tons of character. Now, some of Victorian can even transfer over to some European and Russian influences. When I look at this rounded steeple right here, look at the top of that house. It looks like it's something from St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg, Russia, okay? Or it actually reminds me of some of the old Byzantine churches that I've seen, having that rounded element up there. Look at the multiple windows going around there. You could do something like that and get that to work for you, okay? So, all right, that's 20 minutes of me talking about all this different reference, but this is an important part of design that goes into making you good designers, okay? A lot of people can model. they can come up with ideas, but not everybody can design. There's a huge difference, and that's one of the things that I take pride on trying to teach you guys about, is how do you gather the reference, how do you make your own reference pages when Phil's not going to be there to do it for you, and how do you come up with your own ideas, okay? And we go back to the beginning, there's something that I did for a real production. We come back here and look at Michael's, okay? Michael did a really fantastic job getting this to this level, okay? Yeah, there's a couple little elements that I might pick on. One other thing I might pick on is his rocks. I would have some variation in the rocks, large stones, small stones. They're very pebbleized, which isn't a bad deal. It's just me being picky. One thing I absolutely love in here that you can't see is the wishing well right here. Do you see it? It's very stylized. It's over here in the corner. I would take that thing and bring it up here, and I'd make it much larger and put it here in the foreground. That'd be a great little element, because usually wishing wells and water supplies tend to be away from the house a little bit, okay? And then I really like this old fountain that's up there too. So there are two more elements that I could add in there. Old fountain, I'm gonna write that down and I'll update our blog of reference, okay, and a wishing well. Perhaps there's old props outside. Maybe this guy used to be a farmer. There's some old farming elements lying around, okay? Whatever it might be, think about your design, bring that to you. Here's another great element that he put in the very back there. Can you guys see the gazebo? Houses used to have a little walkway and they'd have a big, area out in the front where you might have family sittings where you'd sit and have tea. You'd have friends that come over and there'd be an old, gazebo over there. Okay, and so there's tons of different references you can put in here. What you don't want to do, don't go into some of the Maya paint effects and start creating all these vines and paint leaves and all this craziness and make your set super heavy, and then it doesn't work. You can model one old giant decrepit tree with a tree trunk in the front with old steps that recede back and have a house. In terms of the house, your house can be an old house from the south. It can be an old house that's somewhere in the middle of Pennsylvania. It could be an old house in the Appalachian Mountains. It could be an old house that's in Seattle with old Victorian influences. In fact, there's some beautiful old houses in the Bay Area in San Francisco. They have a wonderful street with some old double, triple story Victorian houses. So there's all types of historical backgrounds that you could pursue. If you want to put a spin on your story, and you want to go for some, because vampires have been huge lately, right? You want to go for a Transylvania Victorian themed house. That's where part of that historical background even comes from. You can incorporate some of that into it, but think about your design. That's key on this assignment, okay? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this demo, and then I'll render it up for you and put it on the blog. Have fun designing.